Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zone. Welcome to my channel. My name is Ogbanje Joseph. Please subscribe to this channel, share, like, as well as drop a comment on the comment section. So our lecture today is titled "The Concept of Failed State." The concept of failed state. Now, a failed state is a country with a government that cannot or will not deliver essential public goods to its citizenry. The state may hold a seat in the United Nations and functions as a sovereign entity in regional, world politics. Okay, in regional world politics, but as far as the citizens are concerned, the state fails. The state fails them by its inability to perform state functions adequately, nor exercise a monopoly of violence, okay, within their territory. Now, failed states are those deeply in conflict, and it is setting for armed terrorism. Okay, it is a setting for armed terrorism, revolt, and other hostilities between the central government and one or more insurgencies. According to Rothbard 2013, page 1, a failed state is a state that lacks scrutiny, that lacks security, leaders are, of course, lacks security, leaders are corrupt, people are denied participation, and of course, there is violence and they harbor civil wars. And in extreme cases, they have borders but no single recognized constituted government. Now, it is common among scholars to associate the phenomenon of failed state to the African continent. For for instance, countries like Somalia, Burundi, Congo Brazzaville, DRC, that is DR Congo, Liberia, Central African Republic, Sudan, and Nigeria, to mention but a few. But recent happenings have shown that it is not only in Africa that we have failed states. For example, we have the former USSR, former Yugoslavia, Kosovo, Czech Republic, Croatia, Cambodia, Afghanistan, among others. Okay, now let us look at the indices of failed state, using Nigeria as a case study. The indices of failed state using Nigeria as a case study. Number one indices of a failed state is breakdown of security and safety. Now, Nigeria has not been able to project her power beyond her national capital and to control all her territory. Now, for instance, it has lost Bakassi Peninsula to Cameroon, and the northeast, at some point was relatively under the control of Boko Haram. Nigeria as a state has not been able, to prevent cross-border invasions and infiltrations and loss of territory, or to eliminate domestic threats or attacks upon the nation and its social structure. And these don't have adequate response from the what? From the security architecture. So that is actually number one. Number one is breakdown of the security and safety. Now let us look at number two. Number two is low adherence to the rule of law and transparency. Low adherence to the rule of law and transparency. Now, in Nigeria, law is not observed, and there is no independence of judiciary in her political culture. Judges are partial, and they take institutions from from the politicians. Okay, they take instructions from the politicians. So to that extent, you can say that there is low adherence to the rule of law and transparency. Then number three, no respect for human rights. The Nigerian state also hardly guarantees her citizens the right to participate freely openly and fully in politics and the entire political processes. Now, rather, what happens is the abuse of fundamental human rights and, of course, arbitrariness. Okay, so to that extent, you can actually say that yes, the Nigerian nation is actually a failed state. Number three is lack of sustainable economic development. Lack of sustainable economic development. Now, there is no ability of the Nigerian state to provide opportunities for her citizens to prosper and achieve improved standards of living or provide a state-sponsored platform for sustainable economic development, which with strong states do. Okay, implementing macroeconomic policies, developing a regulatory environment that stimulates economic growth and keeping inflation low, and galvanizing foreign and domestic investments are rare in Nigeria as a country. Okay, which actually makes her a failed state. Okay, number five, low human development. Now, the Nigerian state is rated low in providing her citizens the highest quality of educational opportunities and health services. In Nigeria, life expectancy and maternal child mortality is below average. Vaccines against even the most commonest of diseases are non-existent. Portable water is luxury. And to crown it all, the state now encourages medical tourism where privileged class, deplete the country's scarce foreign reserve in attending to their medical needs and those of their families abroad, which is actually another reason, why Nigeria can be referred to as a failed state. Now, another reason is bad leadership. Now, the etiology of state failure have provided that human agency is a critical variable and that there are no instances of state failure without the active connivance of political leader. Now, they discriminate in favor of those cronies, falsified election results, and of course, prey in cruel ways on opposition and of course perceived enemies, voided press freedom, locked up and killed political opponents. All of these are actually indices of what? Of a failed state. Now, another indices of a failed state is debt burden. Of course, you know that, when a state is actually failing, it it borrows to finance her budget. Now, which is exactly what Nigeria does, today. Nigeria is not as in the capability of Nigeria actually growing her external reserve and then growing her economy is actually very low. And so because of that, for her to be able to actually, implement her budget, it has to, borrow, from external sources, which is actually, a typical example of what? Of a failed state. So these and many more are examples of the reasons, are reasons why we can say that there are some countries that are actually referred to as failed state. But there are some scholars that will quickly argue to say that a state is not failed if everything is not in shambles. In which case, if you still have the semblance of security, you still have a semblance of institutions still working, that we're talking about executive, legislature, and judiciary, if you still have those institutions still working and the entire country has not gone up in flames, and the states, I'm talking about the constituents, are still intact, okay, as well as the local governments are still intact, then such a state cannot be referred to as a failed state. Because a failed state is a state where the center can no longer hold the country together again, and the country has actually gone berserk, and of course the country has been decimated. Once a country has been decimated, you can say that such a country has failed. But right now, the best that can be attributed to Nigeria and some other states in Africa is failing states. Yes, they are still in the process of failure, but they have not completely failed. So to that extent, you cannot refer to Nigeria and some of these countries in Africa and of course in third world countries as failed state. At best, one can actually refer to them as failing state. Thank you very much.